of you guys who've been playing Yu-Gi-Oh for a long time, but I've been getting a lot of questions about basic deck building lately, and so I thought, hey, I'm going to do an episode just about deck building to try and help some of those players who maybe aren't tournament players, maybe haven't been playing as long, to try and get better and just try and have a better deck. Now, I've said before in my videos, and I'm going to say it again right now, that I don't believe that any deck is just bad. I think that's a terrible thing to say. I think every deck that has time and effort put into it can be useful, can be competitive. Some will still be more useful and competitive than others. Some will just be better in matchups. That'll happen. But if you really put the time into your deck, then you're going to find more success than if you didn't every single time. So I'm gonna, I guess let's just start. Now, basically, when you're building a deck, you need to understand that there's 4 essential schools of thought when it comes to deck building. 4 different play styles, if you will: aggro, control, burn, and alternate win. Now, the aggro and the control kind of go together, and the alternate win and the burn kind of go together. The aggro decks, you're going to be broken down into 5 main areas that you need to look at cards for your deck, in addition to whatever kind of archetype or whatever that you want to use. And they are monster recursion, back row destruction, monster destruction, and negation, or at least disruption. So, like, just to give you kind of an idea about what some of these cards are that we see all the time in decks. I got some of mine right here. As far as the monster recursion goes, we're kind of limited a lot right now because a lot of cards that have been banned. But Monster Reborn is still going to be our #1 monster recurring card. Also, Call the Haunted. It's at 3 right now. I only run 2 in most of my decks because I really find that's usually enough monster recursion for me. Between those 2 and the Monster Reborn, a couple other good cards, you know. There's Limit Reverse out there that we talked about last week with the Ubel deck. It can be useful for anything that's under 1,000 attack. So if you're running a bunch of little monsters in your deck, that can be very useful. If you're running Remove from Play stuff, things like Return from a Different Dimension can be awesome, or DDR, Different Dimension Reincarnation, can be awesome. Onto Monster Destruction. Some of the Monster Destruction cards that are just really popular. Of course, there's the Torrential Tribute, which just went up to 2. Torrential Tribute is just a great card. Completely resets all the monsters on the field. And especially if you do that when your opponent summons a monster, clears the field, and if they don't have any monsters, it's a great way to go after them the next turn. Dark Hole, old school, but still gets the job done. Great card. Bottomless Trap Hole is an amazing card now after the rulings have changed about priority. Now, before we saw a lot of people running Solemn Warning, which has a 2,000 life point cost, but Bottomless Trap Hole will get the job done just about as well as the Solemn Warning now that the ruling has changed, because most monsters that are going to do a lot of damage are over that. The big exception, of course, is things like the Inzektor Dragonfly, which has 1,000 attack and sneak under there, and you could use the Hornet to pop your Bottomless before. But nevertheless, still a really good card. Mirror Force, another great monster destruction card. Other options, of course, Lightning Vortex can wipe out all your opponent's face-up monsters. Smash and Ground and Fissure can both take out one of your opponent's monsters, a nice 1-for-1. These are all things that we need to consider when we're building our deck. How much monster destruction, how much recursion, how much of each of these elements do we need to put in to make our deck successful. Speed is huge in every Yu-Gi-Oh deck, okay? I don't care if you're playing an alternate win condition, I don't care if you're playing a burn deck, I don't care if you're playing an aggro deck, I don't care if you're playing a control deck. Speed is essential. You need to get to your cards. And that's why I'm going to say it right here, and make sure you take good note of this. 40 is the minimum. 43 is what you should consider your maximum at. I never ever put any of my decks above 43 cards. I try not to go above 40 cards. The smaller your deck, the higher your odds that you're going to pull the cards you need faster. The more copies of the cards you have in your deck, the more often you're going to get to what you need and the combos that you need, and that's all about consistency, and we're going to talk a little bit about consistency here in a second. But just to go on with the speed aspect, Card Trooper, love Card Trooper. Just gonna dump monsters in your graveyard. This guy can go in pretty much any deck. He's great. Foolish Burial, awesome. I can just pick out any monster and put it into my graveyard, which means I can use that monster recursion, or I can use a handful of cool effects with other Magic Trap monsters. This is just a great card. Pot of Duality. I absolutely love Pot of Duality. It does stop you from special summoning, so it does slow you down in that aspect sometimes, but if you really start playing your deck a lot, you'll understand that you're not going to special summon every turn, and so Pot of Duality can be great. Sangan goes good in just about every deck. You can search out any monster with 1,500 attack points or less. Sangan is always a wonderful, wonderful ally to add to your deck. Of course, there's so many more ways to speed up your deck, whether you want to use Reborn Tengus, maybe you want to use Dark Greffers to mill more cards out of your deck, maybe you want to use Raikos and other Lightsworn monsters to mill faster, like we've seen Dragonsworn players doing. All these aspects are based around speed. You have to get to your cards fastest. The final countdown that we talked about a couple videos ago, the card D is one of the main reasons that deck has seen so much success. You see the card D giving you the extra draw power. You got the Gold Sarks giving you the extra draw power. You have the One Day Apiece giving you the extra draw power. Speed is essential to every single deck. Period. Into back row destruction. The absolute best back row destruction cards you see in pretty much everybody's deck. Heavy Storm takes out every single one of the spell and trap cards on the field, and Mystical Space Typhoon, which is back up to 3, which we haven't seen in a very, very long time. But Mystical Space Typhoon is a wonderful card because it gives you that ability, with it being a quick play, set it, your opponent sets a card, and during their end phase you activate it. That means that Call the Haunted can never have a chance to be activated, or that Bottomless Trap will never get the chance to take out your monster, and because it was set that turn, they can't respond with it. Onto the Disruption. Solemn Judgment has been around for a very, very, very long time. You pay half your life points, and this is the I negate anything card. Well, pretty much anything. Can't negate monster effects, but can negate the summon or the activation effect of a spell or trap card. Solemn Judgment can save you, but can also kill you. Paying half your life points early on in the duel, 4,000 life points, I have personally lost because of that, and I've seen a lot of other players lose because of that, so be very careful when you're playing Solemn Judgment. Solemn Warning could also kind of fall into this negation category. I have been side decking my Solemn Warnings lately, and this is really because, like I said, the priority rulings changed, but I still feel these guys are very good. It's a very good card and can be very necessary against certain decks that have the ability to negate their destruction when they come out, so they can negate the Bottomless Trap, but they can't negate the Solemn Warning, which negates, and that's an important thing. I'll just touch on that real quick. Negation and destruction are not the same thing. Okay, negation means that the card never happened. Okay, negate it, out of here. Okay, destruction means it was there and then gets popped, and it's it gets really hard for some duelists, especially new duelists, to understand, because if I summon a Sangan, for example, if you were to torrential tribute it, it would get destroyed. That means it was on the field and then goes to the graveyard. If you were to activate Solemn Judgment or Solemn Warning, it would negate that summon. So it's like the monster never got summoned, but it does use my normal summon for the turn, and so I will not get the effect of Sangan in the graveyard. I won't get to search out a monster. Some other really good cards here. We got Effect Veilers. Effect Veiler is a wonderful monster because it's versatile. Okay, it's a tuner monster, so we can already use it for synchro summoning purposes if we want to, but what it's actually best for is you ditch it during your opponent's main phase in order to negate their monster's effect. This can be really, really advantageous because we're disrupting our opponent during their turn. We're doing it out of our hand, so they can't even see it coming. Gores is another great great card for that disruption principle. You know, your opponent thinks they have game, they're going to rush you, they're going to take you out right now, and just by dropping that Gores, a lot of times that's enough to end the battle phase right there, and you're left with, hey, I've got these two monsters, one's at 2700 and the other one's at X amount, depending on however much damage I took. So that can be really great. Book of Moon can shut down your opponent. This is great to use on things like Stardust Dragon. Hey, you know, I need to destroy all my opponent's cards with this heavy, or with this Dark Hole, but my opponent has a Stardust Dragon out there. Book of Moon their Stardust Dragon, and it's not going to do anything. Same thing with, you know, you see the Lagias and the Dolkas. Hey, if you've got a Lagia, I'm going to hit this because I know you're going to end up negating this just to keep your monster in attack mode. Or if you have the Dolka on the field, I'm going to put your Dolka face down so that you can't negate my monster's effects, and I'm going to try to use my monster's effects then to destroy that Dolka that I just put face down. So excellent for disruption. Once again, you notice it's a quick play. Quick play spell cards do have it over normal spell cards a lot of times. We talked about Stardust Dragon just a second ago. Starlight Road is an awesome way to bring out the Stardust Dragon, because even if you're not running a lot of tuners in your deck, like most people run the Veilers, but I've seen a lot of people that don't have any tuners except for the Veilers in their deck anymore. And so Starlight Road can be great because it gets you that extra monster, plus it stops their card from destroying yours. Once again, we talked about, I mentioned the priority ruling and how that changed. Compulsory Evacuation Device. This is another great card for disruption. You know, your opponent uses their normal summon, and before you give them the chance to Exceed Summon, or before you give them the chance to Synchro Summon, whatever they're going to do, you can pulse that monster right back to their hand. Now you've taken away their normal summon, or you've put that Exceeds or Synchro monster, you know, maybe back into their extra deck, whatever it is. Compulse, excellent for disruption in this format. And the format is always something that you really need to be aware of. You need to really be looking at what's being played out there, because what is being played out there, and we refer to this as the metagame. If you see on Pojo or you see on Yugi videos like this one or Facebook book groups, everyone will talk about the metagame. What the metagame is there's all these decks in your area that are played, okay? And some decks become more popular in certain areas than others. Right now in my area, for instance, Final Countdown is really huge. That's part of the reason I'm talking about it. Inzectors are really huge in my area. Dragon's really huge in my area. You know, other areas I've been in, I've seen decks that you don't see in tournament play, but they're really popular in those areas, and so you have to side deck accordingly, and you want to change your main deck a little bit accordingly, because certain cards will become less useful against other decks, and that's why we have the whole side deck in the first place. So you know, look at your local metagame and go, well, are a lot of people using monster effects on their turn? Nobody's using monster effects on their own turn. Everyone's using monster effects on my opponent's turn. Well, then I'm not going to run Effect Veiler. Everybody's playing weenie monsters. Nobody's playing a monster under 1,500 attack points because, you know, they don't want to get bottomless. So don't run the bottomless. Switch back over to the Solemn Warning. When you're building your deck, it's important to look at the number of monsters, the number of spells, and the number of traps that you're putting in there. A deck that's too monster heavy, a deck that's too spell heavy, a deck that's too trap heavy is going to have a hard time. And there are exceptions to all these rules. I've seen 100% 40 card monster deck before. I've seen pure spell and trap card decks. I'm not trying to down those. I'm just trying to be general. There are exceptions to every rule in Yu-Gi-Oh! That's kind of one of the cool things about it. But you really need to take a focus on balancing your spells, traps, and monsters when you're building a deck so that you can have the most success. Now, because this is such an important video, I'm actually going to be doing this video in 2 parts. So this is going to be the end of part 1, and just go ahead and click on to the next one, and we're going to continue this discussion.